engineering at Pearson VUE, specifically for Open edX. I work closely with actually I work entirely with the edX team. So glad that we've got some of the guys here. Felipe's my collaborator here is going to be talking about the technical part. So the first thank you is to Ana Garcia, who late last night dressed up my presentation a bit. So thank you for that. And quick intro to the team. So Valentina, Gonzalo, Javier, Danielle, Andres. Andres is one of the developers developing this product. So thank you to those guys. All right, so a little bit of background, just very quickly in this. We utilize all the different delivery models that OpenEdX supports. So B2C, very traditional, using OpenEdX e-com, as well as third-party e-com like Shopify through enrollment APIs. B2B, we just recently switched on, so we're now using OpenEdX Enterprise. So we still need to talk before I go back. And we need to extend it for multi-tenancy. But the one that OpenEdX supports, but we don't really talk about as much, is the business, what we call business institution, which is really using the CCX capability. So I'm going to be primarily focusing on that, but also talking about kind of course operations in general. So business institution. So what Pearson VUE does is offer certification courses across the country. So there's hundreds, thousands of training centers offering courses on Azure and security and whatnot. And they use OpenEdX to deliver certification prep courses. So you do all your preparation on OpenEdX, you get a voucher, you go to a physical training center, or you go to a proctored exam to take your test. They need to run these courses on their schedules. So they can't use public access courses. They need to be able to schedule them monthly or whatever they need to do. They're all instructor facilitated, and they need to limit the number of enrollments. So we're selling access. We're licensing these courses. And we also need to limit the course access duration. So they get access for 8 weeks, and then it's shut off. Right now, it's not a very elegant shut off. We've got a big hammer, and we just unenroll them when that time comes. One of the enhancements we have, and looking forward to using hooks to be able to do such a thing, is to handle the expiration a little more elegantly. Now, I don't know if anyone's got experience with CCX here. If you do, no hands. It's not the easiest to onboard new users. So it's a fairly contrived back and forth process. You have to register on the platform. You have to get invited to the course. You have to tell the person you're invited to the course. You have to be elevated to a CCX coach. You have to do it. It's a lot of back and forth. Not quite as complex as this picture, but there are multiple steps. There's a lot of error points. There's a lot of failure scenarios. There's a lot of off-ramps. The fulfillment of an order could take days if it doesn't go happy path. So we need to kind of improve that. The experience is terrible. Turns out initial impressions do count. People have walked away saying this is too hard, can't do it. And the manual support is tremendously expensive. Oops. Oh, I changed my slides. Okay. So our two options were, I talked about CCX already, but the two options were course runs, regular course runs, or CCX. Course runs just don't scale, not yet, not till we get to Blockstore. Our courses are 100 megabyte, 200 megabytes. If we're creating reruns of courses that are that size, the platform's going to struggle. CCX solves that problem. It gives us the privacy, allows us to individualize the schedule for the course hours. It allows us to control the instructor access, so they don't get full instructor access, they just get access to their course, limited access, and it scales fine. There are some missing requirements, so we need to be able to do multiple runs per instructor, so instructor could run a course 12 times throughout a year. Can't do that with regular out-the-box CCX, you're limited to just the one, so we had to make some enhancements there. And enrollment limits. We're selling, say, 1,000 seats in a particular course or set of courses, but it's across course runs, right? So there is an ability in OpenEdX to put an enrollment limit on an individual course run, but you can't aggregate those. And we need to say, okay, you're going to have 1,000 seats, you can enroll 1,000 people over 10 runs of the course, or 12 runs of the course. So details aren't important, but all the back and forth arrows, and there's actually more of them, are all the back and forth between somebody at Pearson and multiple people at Pearson and the end customer, and then their instructor. So there's just a lot back and forth. It's all email-based. It's very expensive. This is kind of more of a target process, and it's actually a little bit more than we want to have, but at least it flows from top left to bottom right. So there's no back and forth. Ultimately, we want to get to a place where you can make the order right on our e-com site, select the course, select the number of seats that you want, press submit, and it's done. Everything else is handled. And we're on the way. So quick summary, what the options were: regular runs versus CCX versus what we're calling extended CCX. In the future, and I won't talk to Philippe will deal with this, but in the future it'll be regular course runs that are block store based. So let me just quickly talk about licensing. So I kind of touched on this already, actually. But we need to limit enrollments across the runs. So it's not you're buying seats for an individual course run, you're buying seats that can be applied at the course level. And we're restricting the access duration to days. We can do extensions, but it's limited to a certain number of days. We initially did this for single courses. Then we started working with a different group within Pearson VUE. They said, well, we need multi-course licenses. We want to sell not just a license to a single course. We want to sell 1,000 seats into this program of courses. So we had to change it to make it multi-course. And we want to be able to incrementally add more seats. So hopefully we're wildly successful, and we can add in more over time. So a new order results in you buy another 100 seats, gets added to the license, your limit's increased. So course operations. When I was searching for a picture to try to capture the state of Open edX, and think of it as a three-legged kind of stool, I actually found out that a three-legged stool isn't wobbly because all the points are on the same plane. So it's not that OpenEdX is wobbly. It's just unbalanced. Right? It's got strong support for the learner, strong support for the educator. The course operations, I don't think it's controversial to say it's a little bit lacking in that regard. So course operations is one of the things that actually gets in the way of selling these courses. Because somebody at Pearson needs to manage all of this. And it needs to be managed centrally, not across tens or hundreds of course runs. If you're all familiar with the platform sufficiently, if you had 100 course runs that you're trying to manage, you enrolled in all of them, your dashboard's going to have 100 of those course cards. And you need to find that course card in order to dig into it, get to the instructor dashboard, pull enrollment reports, do whatever you need to do. So that's just not feasible. We also can't tell who the course runs belong to, right? It's institutions that are buying these. So we need to be able to associate the runs that are being created with institutions so that we can then filter reports and only in management at that level. There's no automatic enforcement of licensing. And then all the course staff needs managed across all of these courses, both the primary or the master course and at the CCX level. And that's when you create a rerun of courses, you lose all the staff. When you create a new CCX, you lose all the staff. So there's just a lot of overhead in kind of managing course staff. And again, there's no reporting. There's no cross-run reporting that exists today. So that's the challenges. So I'm not going to do a demo, but I did want to kind of give people a view of what we're starting to build. So we've built, aside from the back-end support, we've built a new MFE to allow you to manage what we're calling institutions, which you could think of as enterprises, but it's distinct from the OpenEdX enterprise capability. So we've added new models for institutions. And interesting, a quick aside, a lot of our training centers, a lot of our courses utilize third-party lab services, lab on demand. And one of the challenges that we have, or at least our customers have, is that they have existing relationships with those services. So their students go to, their instructors go there to see the lab dashboard. But when the students come in through LTI, they lose that association. So we made an extension to the LTI consumer, which I think is now in master, where we can dynamically pick up what we call the institution external ID. And it's pluggable, it's extensible. So you could change that with an enterprise ID or some other contextual data for course contextual data, user contextual data. You picked up dynamically, added as a custom parameter, and then passed across to through the LTI launch. So that's what that external ID is for. Licenses, as I mentioned, you add them for the institution. You can add as many courses as you like. You spec the expiration date or the access duration. You can incrementally add as many seats as you like over time. We capture the order reference, and it's meant to be used to fill out the ecom order ref if you have one, and presumably most people that were using this do have some fulfillment platform. All of this is API based. So while there's a UI today, we know that the upstream knows that integration was not going to happen in our time frame. So we built the UI to support this. But the back end, it's all API driven. So at some point, this will be integrated with an ecom platform, and that will allow us to achieve that target of seamless purchase all the way through to create the course and enrollment. We're also centralizing reporting. So this is showing both, this one's showing what we call the master course, the primary course level. We roll up all the enrollments across all the CCXs. But you can also drill down to the individual CCX level, look at it per institution, or look at it globally. Similarly, enrollments is another one that's tough to deal with. Go to every single course run on your dashboard to pull an enrollment report, check if you're in compliance, or to manipulate enrollments is a bear. So we've centralized all of this in this page. We also synthesize some new states. So if you're familiar with the course enrollment table, but also the course enrollment allowed table, which are for pending enrollments for people that are not yet registered, they do consume a seat. So we've synthesized the kind of pending state, and that does actually consume a license seat. And we're also extending it to show expiration. So a future release of this, the expiration state will actually be persisted. So expired and active we could consume a seat, whereas disabled would not. All right, very quickly for the future, there's three tracks. There's the operations track that I've just been showing you, where we want to enhance this by allowing operations. And again, this is on the Pearson side, not on the institution side, but allow to Pearson operations to extend access for somebody. So they got sick, they got COVID, they were out for 2 weeks, they went to a conference. And you need to extend their access by a week. That's not something we want to give the institution admin power to do. It's just too much power, too much abuse, a possibility of abuse. So this would be a request to Pearson operations to make that change. More cross-run reporting. So for all the reports that you'd expect, grading reports, progress, completion, problem summaries, all of that we want to pull into this portal. We also need to provide similar kind of capabilities that are more restricted for the institutions themselves. So they need some management capability. They don't have that today, other than through the CCX coach dashboard, and we don't want to give them staff access on a CCX, because now they've got access to the whole instructor dashboard, and now they can do enrollments and bypass some of our restrictions, which we're going to solve with what Felipe's going to talk about. They also need cross-run reporting. So as an institution, they've got 10 CCXs. They want to see everybody that's enrolled. They want to see what progress that their students are making. And then finally, we need to round out the APIs. So it's all been developed API first, right? It's driving the UI, but it's also going to drive our future integration with fulfillment platforms. So your e-commerce platform, your CRM, that should all be integrated with through these APIs. allowing that truly seamless flow that has no hands on it at all, from the point of seeing the course you want to purchase all the way through to enrolling students into the course. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Felipe.
Oops, that wasn't it. I opened the wrong one. That's one. So yeah, that was quite a business case, and then our team was called in to do the technical side of the story. The how do we implement this in a way that it doesn't feel like shooting ourselves in the feet? So our main objective was to automate that complex process and replace what at the time was like long chains of emails going back and forth and making everyone a little bit stressed, because the moment that the process is as human bound, then at some point someone will make a small mistake, but that messes with the whole process, and that was very stressful. More specifically, we wanted to create that portal that you saw in the images. At the portal, we wanted to be able to create and update every resource that was available. And we wanted to show information. Like the operations team, they have the tools they need, or some of the tools they need, but sometimes accessing the information itself was very hard. And then after that management portal was created, we needed to enforce the licenses. So what good is selling the licenses if then everyone can just bypass them by continue enrolling students where they shouldn't be? And we wanted to add some reporting, like cross CCX runs capability. And more from a developer's perspective, what we want to do is do what we want and get out of the way. We don't want to be stuck with an older release just because we did something that cannot be migrated. And we had this restriction that there would be 2 separate teams working on one single instance, and one of the teams, which wasn't the one building this, was going to be managing the release cadence and the upgrades. So we wanted to be out of the way of them so that they could continue supporting the other features they had without us like making it even harder. Naturally, we also wanted to maintain high standards of quality for development, and since this project started when the time was about to move from Python to 7 into 3.5 and 3.8, we wanted to have like a full set of tools for developers to already develop the best code they can instead of doing spaghetti code. And because every customer ever wants this, a short and quick feedback cycle to know if we're doing the right thing. So that's the architecture we decided on. It is an MFE that where we could get all the benefits from the MFEs. From the technical standpoint, normally MFEs get a lot of pressure because they're more difficult to get on board. But once you're in, it is very flexible to develop on top of them, and you're very fast. So we wanted that speed, and we wanted to be able to leverage all the goodness of the MFEs. Those needed to communicate, as Scott said, over APIs. And for that, we built an open edX plugin, which creates new APIs that were otherwise inexistent. And those APIs need to connect to features and models and things that are already at edX platform. So we needed to find a way to connect that without making a big mess. And finally, we also needed to change code that was already in edX platform. So this is the hardest challenge for someone extending edX platform, how to do all this and still do it maintainably. On the model side of what the business was like, it was complex, but it wasn't that complex. We could map it, and we could map it without diving into too many or too complex models. We still needed to create the institutions, the licenses, and the administrators to be able to attach this information, this metadata, attach it to the already existing users at edX platform, and we needed to have the orders so that we could eventually enforce them. but these all could be created as new models in the OpenEDX plugin. And for the MFE, we started this work a long time ago before the migration to Node 16 was happening. So we just settled for what was in there. We took the front-end template application and we jumped from there, which was, again, a great starting point. And this is the part of MFEs that normally doesn't get talked about. That is, when it works for you, it works wonders, and you can get started really quickly. The stack was a little bit challenging for our team. We had, at the time, 2 senior members of the team and 2 new ones, and the new ones were struggling to get started with all of this. But eventually, the MFE went great, and we had this sweet rapid deployment and quick capabilities. Connecting to edX platform was a little bit more difficult because I'm highlighting that we only needed to call like 8 extension points, and that was a little bit painful. If anyone was at the hooks talk that I was speaking on before, this is the project, or this is one of the projects that inspired us to end up building the hooks framework, because these many touching points with edX platform required us to be able to go in and out without creating too much of like an anchor that would drag the upgrade process down. So that was very inspiring, and that part of that work ended up in the hooks framework. And the last part of this was we still needed to be able to call from the plugins. We needed to be able to call code from the edX platform, and we settled with an interface around parts of the code that will be called by the plugin are written as an interface in this edX wrapper layer, and then we will implement different backends for different versions of the platform. So we will implement one version of the interface for Lilac, and then one for Maple, and then one for the next. Oftentimes, it doesn't need to be replaced. We just copy it and paste it, and it works. But if it doesn't, we can always go back, and we can select on runtime which of those connections we will use for the interface. This is something that we also, we're looking forward to publish and create a whole new different project that's called the stable API, so that we don't have to go over this. So yeah, with some luck, some of these will be also becoming a more strong foundation for more developers to build on top of that. And then something very similar to what ended being hooks, we call it here run extension point, but this is what eventually became a filter. So this was the starting point for that. The idea here is that on selected places at the platform, we call this function run extension point, and we can then go and write our code in the plugin instead of having to write all the code in the platform. When we do this, we still need to migrate, and it's still a little bit of work, but then we don't need to go and find hundreds of files that change dramatically and diffs are impossible to read. It's just we go to the place where the extension point needs to be run, and we rewrite those lines. And yeah, that's part of what eventually became the hooks architecture. This all worked great. It became a product, what Scott just showed. And now that we look back on it, we recognize that some things, maybe we made it harder than they needed to be, or like we would like to build now on top of newer tools that are available. And we will be doing so, for example, with the hooks framework. But one of the issues that we found later was that the license enforcement was built on top of the API that receives the information from the CCX dashboard, and that created a possible pathway for someone who's also an instructor to use the next tab dashboard and bypass the enrollment. But that one's relatively easy to solve once hooks for enrollment are in place. And the other thing that we could have done differently was to integrate the business states of those licenses beforehand, so that when we unenroll someone, we don't just unenroll them like quick and dirty, but keep some record of what happened and why those students were enrolled if their license expired or whatever needed to happen. And finally, for the technical roadmap, we want to be able to refactor out every reference to Persona and CCX so that moving forward, open sourcing this is easier, this library, but also moving into something like Blockstore and Blockstore runs instead of CCX is much easier. We'll probably be continuing to develop and create more APIs for supporting all the work. And I'd like to extend thanks to all the team that worked on this, both the team that already was in Scott's presentation and also members of the team that are no longer there but worked very hard over the last year to make that happen. So yeah, that's kind of the technical bits.
Yeah, there's one thing I'd like to mention, but you covered it. So that we got the agreement to open source this as well. So it's all the models are all Pearson prefixed. So we're going to do that refactoring. But once that's done, this is going to be open source, and it's certainly interested in talking to more people that have got challenges with course operations, and seeing if there's some collaboration that we can do. So.
Are there any questions either from you or Scott?
On the front-end side, I'm wondering if you looked at all at the front-end app support tools repo as like a starting point, or it sounds like you just started based with the...
We started with the cookie template.
Okay. Yeah, the support tools is something that we use at TU edX, and it looks somewhat similar to what you were showing as far as showing enrollments and being able to see their states and such, so there's probably some overlap there.
Maybe I was late. This course licensing scene is like pretty oftenly requested feature from from training companies, which are providing their courses to corporates. And one of the biggest question is what we will do, what we should do when the license is expired and someone is halfway through the course. What is your answer to that?
As I said earlier, today we take a big hammer and we just unenroll them because we don't have any way of finessing it. But we are planning to, with adoption of hooks, we want to treat this a little more elegantly. So they won't just see the card, or the card won't just disappear from the dashboard. Instead, there'd be some messaging that would appear saying, your course access has expired, please contact your administrator to request an extension. And then that would come back to the Pearson operations to then approve or not, and do an individual extension. So yeah, big hammer today, but a little bit more finesse in the future. I think right now we're doing about 60 days. So yeah. I mean, these are test preparation, certification preparation courses. So these are supposedly highly motivated learners that have a plan to do an Azure security certification or AWS certification. So they go through that, they get their coupon, they go to a training center, to a test center, and complete their certification. So they're motivated. We have high completion on these.
Corporates wants to learn, but
right.
It's not. It doesn't mean that someone is wanting to learn.
Yeah. So
we are not we, but our customers are licensing to corporations that number of seats, and then a corporation tries their best to motivate their employees to do something.
right. So your model's probably more like the traditional enterprise integration.
So with subscriptions, it's a similar problem. Once it expires, what do you do with the people who are enrolled in the course? Today, we drop them from the verified track to the audit track. We still let them finish if they want to finish an audit, but they don't lose their verified track. So that was our big hammer that we decided to